Patrick O'Connell hadn't slept in 36 hours. His flannel shirt stained with apple juice and mashed banana as he cradled his 5-year-old daughter Harper on the hard plastic chair like it was a throne. She was burning up and coughing so hard it shook her little body. The nurse had said it would be a few hours, probably more. It was 2 in the morning. He rubbed his eyes, scanning the waiting room. Most people were either asleep or scrolling on their phones, but one woman caught his eye sitting across from him, curled into herself, arms crossed tight over a designer coat that didn't match the steel blue bags under her eyes. She looked out of place, too polished, too quiet, like she didn't belong in a cheap in Queens at all. Harper stirred in his lap, letting out a weak cough. "You okay, baby?" he whispered, brushing her curls out of her face. Harper nodded, her voice hoarse. "Daddy, don't like it here." "I know, sweetheart," Patrick murmured. "We'll be out of here soon, I promise." The woman across from him glanced up then. Her eyes green, tired, but kind met his. She offered a small smile. "You've been here a while, huh?" she asked, her voice smooth but cracking slightly at the edges. He nodded. "About 6 hours, you." "4," she said, exhaling. "You look like you haven't slept in days." He chuckled, low and dry. "That obvious?" "Only a little." Her lips quirked up. "I'm Elodie Evans." Patrick adjusted Harper gently. "Patrick, and this is Harper." Harper gave a small wave with her fingers. "Hi." Elodie smiled. "Hi, Harper, you're very brave being here." Harper leaned her head back against her dad's chest. "Daddy says brave girls get pancakes." Patrick blinked. "That I do." Elodie looked at him, amused. "Pancakes cure everything." "Pretty much," he said. "What about you? You okay?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the strap of her purse. "Just a scare. Thought I was having a panic attack. Heart racing, short of breath. Turned out to be nothing, thankfully." He nodded slowly. "Still scary, though." "Yeah," she said, "but I think talking to someone helps, so thanks." "Anytime," he said simply, shifting Harper in his lap. "This place, it's not made for comfort." "No," she agreed, "but maybe for connection." That made him chuckle. That's a fancy way of saying we're all miserable together. Elodie laughed, and it was soft but real. "Exactly." They talked for another hour. Nothing deep: favorite movies, weird stories, how Harper once tried to flush a Barbie down the toilet and nearly flooded their apartment. Patrick didn't notice how easily it flowed, how quickly he forgot he was exhausted and broke and terrified about Harper's fever. He didn't notice Elodie watching him when he wasn't looking, her gaze lingering on the way he held his daughter, the quiet devotion in his rough hands. Eventually, a nurse called Harper's name, and Patrick stood up, groaning softly as his back cracked. "Guess that's us." Elodie nodded, something flickering in her eyes. "I hope she's okay." "Thanks," he said. "It was nice talking to you, Elodie." "You too, Patrick." He turned to walk away, but Harper tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered. "She was nice. You should give her pancakes too." He looked back at Elodie, who was smiling softly. "I'll think about it," he said, grinning as he carried Harper away. By the time they were discharged hours later, the waiting room was empty. Elodie was gone. He figured that was the end of it. But it wasn't. 3 days later, he was working his 3rd shift in 2 days at a greasy diner off Roosevelt, wiping down a booth when he looked up and there she was. Elodie Evans, in a black coat and jeans, standing at the hostess podium like she belonged there. "Hey," she said, her voice light. "I was kind of hoping you'd be here." Patrick blinked. "You serious?" "Yes," she said. "Is it weird?" "Don't know. I thought about that night a lot, you and Harper and the pancakes." He smiled slowly. You came here for pancakes. I came here for company, she said, but I wouldn't say no to pancakes. He cleared his throat, gesturing to a booth. Sit anywhere. I'll bring you the best ones we've got. She slid into a booth by the window, and he brought her a plate stacked high with syrup and strawberries. You weren't kidding, she said after the first bite. These are magical. Only the best for ER survivors, Patrick said, sliding into the booth opposite her during his break. They talked again, this time longer. She asked about Harper, how she was feeling, what she liked to draw, if she still had a fever. He asked about Elodie's job, and she carefully said she worked in investments, brushing it off before changing the subject. He didn't push. When her plate was clean and she licked syrup off her thumb, he looked at her and said, So, you really just showed up for pancakes? No, she said, honest and bold. I showed up for you. He stared at her, stunned. I don't know what this is, she continued, her cheeks flushing, but I haven't stopped thinking about that night, about you, about Harper. I just wanted to see you again. Patrick leaned back, his heart pounding. He hadn't dated in years, not since Harper's mom left. He didn't have time, money, or energy for romance. But something about Elodie made him feel like maybe life wasn't just about surviving anymore. Okay, he said quietly, let's see where this goes. She smiled, and it was brighter than the diner lights. So they did. He didn't know her last name was tied to one of the biggest tech companies in the world. He didn't know she had more money than most small countries. He just knew she made him laugh. She listened. She asked about Harper and actually cared. And for the first time in a long time, Patrick O'Connell felt like someone was seeing him not as a broke single dad, but as a man worth knowing. He had no idea she was falling in love with him already. Elodie didn't expect Harper to open the door. The little girl peered up at her from behind a wooden baby gate, clutching a purple crayon in one hand and a juice box in the other. You're not the pizza guy, Harper said, slightly disappointed. Elodie laughed softly. No, but I brought muffins. Patrick's voice called from somewhere inside. Harper, who is it? A muffin lady. Elodie stepped over the threshold as Patrick rounded the corner, his shirt untucked, a towel slung over one shoulder, and a laundry basket balanced on his hip. He froze when he saw her. You didn't say you were coming. I texted, she said, holding up a brown bag, but I figured you might be too busy to check. He exhaled through his nose, setting the basket down with a thud. You're not wrong. I can leave if it's a bad time. No, he said quickly. Stay, please, just ignore the chaos. I grew up in a townhouse with 5 cousins and 2 Labrador retrievers, she said, stepping through the living room. This is paradise. She wasn't lying. The apartment was old and cramped, but it was clean in the corners that mattered. There were finger paintings taped to the fridge and a giant stuffed elephant slumped across the couch. A faint smell of cinnamon lingered in the air. It felt like a place that was lived in with love. Patrick watched her scan the room. I didn't think someone like you would be okay with a place like this. What exactly is someone like me? She asked, setting the bag on the counter. He hesitated. You're wearing heels, and perfume that probably costs more than my rent. She gave a small shrug. I like nice things. Doesn't mean I need them to enjoy a blueberry muffin and a coloring session. Harper tugged on her sleeve. Do you color? I do, but I'm terrible at staying inside the lines. Harper gasped, me too. Patrick raised an eyebrow, a rebel hut. Don't tell my board of directors. He blinked, wait, board of directors. Elodie froze for half a second, then forced a chuckle. Kidding. I mean, kind of. It's just a fancy way of saying I work with a lot of opinionated people. Patrick didn't press. Instead, he opened the bag and pulled out a muffin, breaking it in half. Well, they've got good taste. These smell amazing. From a bakery in the West Village, she admitted. I thought about baking them myself, but figured you'd prefer something edible. Accurate, he said, taking a bite. All right, you're officially forgiven for the surprise visit. She smiled, pulling out a small box of crayons from her purse. I didn't come empty-handed for Harper either. Harper squealed, glitter crayons. Only the sparkliest. While Harper sprawled on the floor with her new art supplies, Patrick leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching Elodie with a look he hadn't worn in years' curiosity. You're full of surprises. I like keeping people on their toes. He tilted his head. You always bring muffins to men you barely know. Only the ones who stay up all night in hospital chairs with their daughters. His expression softened. You didn't have to. I know, she said, meeting his gaze, but I wanted to. A silence passed between them, not uncomfortable, just charged. Patrick cleared his throat. I've got work in a couple hours, but if you're not in a rush, you can stay. Harper's clearly thrilled. I've got time. He nodded, then stepped into the small kitchen to rinse out a mug. You drink coffee, right? Obsessively. He poured her a cup, black. She took it without asking for cream or sugar. I was going to ask you something, he said, keeping his eyes on the rim of his own mug. The other day, you said you didn't know what this was, between us. She blinked. Right. Well, I don't either, but I know Harper talks about you like you're a Disney princess, and I don't remember the last time I looked forward to seeing someone like this. Elodie's throat tightened. I feel the same. He looked up. I should probably let you know I'm not good at this. Neither am I, she admitted, setting her mug down. The last person I dated thought I worked in luxury retail. I didn't correct him for 6 months. Patrick laughed genuinely. Why? Because the second people know what I do, or rather, what I have, they treat me differently. He studied her. You mean money? She hesitated. Let's just say I'm not struggling. He didn't push her for details. Instead, he said, I'm not exactly rolling in it if you hadn't noticed. I noticed, she said gently, and I don't care. Harper held up a picture then. Look, I drew us all at the park. Patrick took it with a grin. That's me. Yup, and that's Elodie, and that's a dog. We don't have one yet, but maybe someday. Elodie laughed. I like the optimism. Patrick glanced at her, then back at the drawing. Maybe someday. They stayed like that until the sun dipped behind the buildings. Elodie helped Harper clean up the crayons, then stood to leave. At the door, Patrick touched her elbow. You coming by again? If you'll have me. He nodded slowly. Yeah, like that. Harper hugged her leg. Next time, can we make pancakes? I'll bring the syrup. When the door closed behind her, Patrick stood for a long time staring at the spot she'd just occupied. He didn't understand how someone like her had walked into his world, but he knew one thing. She wasn't just passing through. The last thing Elodie expected on a Saturday morning was to be elbow-deep in pancake batter, while a 5-year-old in a glittery apron critiqued her stirring technique. You're doing it wrong, Harper said, a serious frown on her face. Daddy says no lumps or it turns into sad cakes. Elodie glanced down at the bowl. Sad cakes sound tragic. They are, Harper said gravely. Once, they were so bad we gave them to the pigeons. Patrick walked in from the hallway, a fresh shirt stretched across his chest, still damp from the shower. You're scaring her off, Harper. She has to know the risks, Harper replied, arms crossed. I appreciate the honesty, Elodie said, laughing as she handed the whisk over. Patrick watched them from the doorway for a beat, then crossed to the counter and leaned against it, brushing his fingers through his damp hair. "You're really doing this, huh?" "What, making breakfast with an intense 5-year-old sous chef?" "Apparently, yes." "No, I mean this," he gestured around the kitchen, "us. My very average life." Elodie looked up at him, face open. "I didn't come here for average. I came here because it feels real." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached for the coffee pot and poured her a cup. "You ever make pancakes in heels before?" She took the mug, arching a brow. "You really think I'd wear heels to cook?" "There's a first time for everything." Harper let out a triumphant "done" and slid the bowl across the counter. "No lumps." Patrick leaned over, inspecting it. "Looks like a masterpiece." The griddle sizzled as he poured the batter, and the kitchen filled with the warm smell of vanilla and butter. Elodie watched the way he moved, efficient, practiced, like he'd done this 100 times before. Because he had. Every day on his own. "You ever miss it?" she asked softly. He glanced at her. "Miss what?" "Having someone else in the kitchen, sharing the mornings." His mouth lifted, not quite a smile. "I got used to silence, but lately I don't mind the noise." Harper hopped onto a stool and pointed at Elodie. "She sings when she thinks no one's listening." Patrick raised an eyebrow. "Is that true?" "Elodie sings songs from the radio, but changes the words to talk about pancakes." "I feel so betrayed," Elodie muttered. "No, you're just caught," Patrick said. "Now you've got to perform." "Absolutely not." Harper chanted, "Sing, sing, sing." Patrick joined in, banging the spatula on the counter like a drum. "Come on, it's tradition now." Elodie rolled her eyes, but her cheeks were pink. "Fine, but you're flipping those pancakes in rhythm." It wasn't a great song. It barely rhymed. But Harper was shrieking with laughter, and Patrick was grinning so wide it made Elodie's chest ache. This wasn't her world. Not the chipped countertops, the sticker-covered fridge, the window that didn't quite close all the way. But somehow, it felt more like home than any penthouse she'd ever stood in. After breakfast, Harper disappeared into her room to build a pillow tower, and Patrick handed Elodie a dish towel. "You dry, I'll rinse." She nodded, and they fell into a quiet rhythm, the kind that happens when silence doesn't need to be filled. "I've got something coming up," she said eventually, voice careful. "An event, nothing fancy, just a fundraiser dinner." He glanced at her, brow lifting. "What kind of fundraiser?" "For a youth mentorship program. It's something I've been supporting for a while." "Sounds important." "It is," she said, "and I'd like you to come as my guest." Patrick paused mid-rinse. "Me, at a charity dinner?" "Yes." He dried his hands. "Elodie, I don't own a tux. I don't have cufflinks or polished shoes. Wouldn't know which fork to use or what wine to pretend I like." She met his gaze. "I don't care about any of that." "I'm not sure I belong there." "You belong with me," she said, quiet but firm. "That's enough." He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "What about Harper?" "She's invited too. It's a daytime event. There's a whole kids program, craft tables, face painting, the works." He hesitated, then nodded once. "All right, we'll go." Elodie smiled, relieved. "Good, I'll send a car." "The car." She froze. Patrick's brow furrowed. "You've done that before." "I have." "That bakery in the West Village, those shoes that never get scuffed, a car." She set the towel down. "There's something I haven't told you." He crossed his arms. "Okay." She swallowed. "My family owns a company, a large one. We're in tech, infrastructure, finance. I sit on the executive board, and I'm not exactly living paycheck to paycheck." He didn't flinch. "How not exactly?" "I'm a billionaire, Patrick." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a long time, all he did was breathe. Then he said, "You're serious?" "Yes." "And you didn't tell me." "I wanted to. I liked being treated like a person, not an investment portfolio." He stepped back from the sink. "So all this life you're just visiting?" "No, I'm choosing." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know what to do with this." "You don't have to do anything right now," she said softly. "Just come to the fundraiser, meet my world, let me meet yours in return." Harper poked her head around the corner. "Daddy, my tower fell." Patrick didn't look away from Elodie. "I'll be there in a second, kiddo." Harper vanished again. "I never wanted to lie to you," Elodie continued. "But I knew the second I told you the truth, everything might change." He blew out a breath. "It has." "Will you still come?" He nodded once. "Yeah, but not for the tux or the dinner, for you." Her fingers curled into fists at her side. "That's all I wanted." As she slipped on her coat to leave, he opened the door for her but didn't walk away. "Elodie," he said before she stepped out. "Yes." "I don't know what this is yet, but if I find out you're just slumming it for a thrill." "I'm not," she said. "I'm falling in love with you." She didn't wait for an answer. She just walked down the stairs, heart pounding, not knowing if she'd hear those words back. "Not yet." Harper's glittery sandals tapped against the marble floor as her hand clutched Patrick's tightly. The event space was enormous glass walls opening to a skyline view, soft jazz floating from a string quartet, and enough fresh-cut orchids to perfume the air with quiet elegance. Patrick's tie was slightly crooked, and his jacket borrowed from his neighbor pulled a little at the shoulders, but he stood tall. Beside him, Harper wore a pale blue dress Elodie had sent the day before, with a note that simply read, "For the adventure." Patrick hadn't answered her message. He didn't have the words then. Now, as they stepped into a world of gleaming champagne flutes and whispered stock forecasts, he was still searching for them. A woman with a clipboard approached, smiling warmly. "You must be Mr. O'Connell. Miss Evans said to expect you. Harper's activities are this way. We've got a whole team supervising." Harper looked up at Patrick. "You'll come get me later." "Promise," he said, brushing her curls from her face. "Have fun, okay?" She nodded, then skipped off with the woman. Patrick exhaled slowly as he turned toward the main hall. The doors opened as if on cue. Elodie stood at the far end of the room, talking with two men in tailored suits. Her gown was deep navy, understated but impossibly elegant. Her hair swept up, neck bare except for a slender silver chain. She looked like every inch of the empire she came from, but when she saw him, her expression shifted like the room fell away entirely. He moved toward her, every step deliberate, his eyes never leaving hers. "You came," she said softly. "I said I would." Her gaze flicked over his face. "You look incredible." "I feel like a cardboard cutout next to everyone here." "You don't," she said. "You look like someone who belongs." Patrick glanced around, taking in the quiet wealth surrounding them. "I'm still not sure what you see in me." "I see someone who shows up," she said, "even when it costs him something." He didn't respond, not yet. Instead, he offered his arm. "So, do I get the tour?" She smiled and led him through the space, introducing him to board members, program directors, and a woman from the mayor's office. Patrick nodded, shook hands, answered questions about Harper, always about Harper. No one asked what he did for a living. No one sneered at his borrowed jacket. Elodie had made sure of that. After a while, they slipped onto a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The air was cooler here, the noise muffled. "I didn't mean to keep this part of my life from you," Elodie said, her voice low. "I just wanted to know who I was outside of it." "I get that," Patrick said, but it's a hell of a thing to carry alone. I'm not alone anymore. He looked at her carefully. You sure about that? I've never been more certain. He leaned on the railing, the city stretching out below them. You know, a month ago I was counting quarters for groceries, and now I'm here, looking like I belong in a tuxedo magazine, wondering if this is all about to vanish. It won't, she said, unless you want it to. He turned to face her. I don't know how to fit into your world. You don't have to, she said. I'm building something new. I don't want someone to fit into my past, I want someone to build my future with me. Patrick rubbed the back of his neck. That future comes with a kid who needs me more than anything. Can't just follow champagne and city views. I've got to be home when she wakes up scared in the middle of the night. Elodie stepped close, her voice steady. Then I'll be there too. He blinked. You serious? I've been in love with you since the night you held your daughter like the world couldn't touch her, she said, and I haven't stopped falling since. Patrick's throat worked, but no sound came out. I'm not asking you to give anything up, she continued. Just let me in. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he kissed her. It wasn't urgent or showy. It was quiet and certain, like a lock clicking into place. Her hands curled into his jacket, and his touched the side of her face like he couldn't believe she was real. When they finally pulled apart, she laughed softly. That's one way to RSVP. He grinned. I'll bring the syrup. Later, Harper found them inside, her face painted like a butterfly, a balloon animal flopping in her hand. Daddy, she said, tugging on his leg, there was a magician and I got a cupcake and I made a bracelet and I want to live here forever. Patrick scooped her up. You had a good time, huh? The best. Elodie reached out, brushing a smudge of frosting from Harper's cheek. Think you'd be okay with me visiting sometimes? Harper tilted her head. Do you sing silly songs? Only the silliest. Then yes. Patrick looked between the two of them, his heart full in a way he hadn't known was possible. It wasn't the penthouse or the gala, or the money, not really. It was that Elodie had seen him, all of him, and stayed. And he was done running from it. A week later, he opened the door to a 2-bedroom apartment in a better part of town. The security deposit? Covered. Quietly. Anonymously. By a corporate grant Elodie had orchestrated through her foundation. He hadn't asked for it, but when he saw Harper's face light up at her new room with the window that didn't leak, he didn't argue. That night they had pancakes on the floor. Elodie brought strawberries, Patrick brought music, Harper brought stickers. And for the first time in his life, Patrick O'Connell didn't feel like he was surviving. He felt like he was home. Patrick stood in front of the narrow mirror by the front door, adjusting the collar of his crisp white shirt. It was the first time in years he'd worn something without a stain or a frayed edge. The navy jacket hung clean and sharp across his shoulders, one of the few pieces he owned that fit properly now, thanks to a quiet shopping trip Elodie had insisted on, though she'd let him choose everything himself. Behind him, Harper was sitting on the couch, her hair curled into glossy ringlets, a tiny gold clip shaped like a star resting just above her temple. She tapped her toes in shiny ballet flats and held a folded card in her lap. Daddy, you forgot your pocket square, she said, holding it out to him. He turned, taking the pale blue square and tucking it into place. What would I do without you? You'd be boring, she replied matter-of-factly. Patrick chuckled, then looked toward the window. She's late. Harper tilted her head. You're nervous. I'm not nervous. You are. You always do that thing with your hands. He looked down. Sure enough, he was rubbing his palms together. He dropped them. The doorbell rang. Harper gasped and ran to answer it before he could stop her. Elodie stood on the other side, wearing a soft cream dress that caught the fading light like silk. Her hair was down, curled at the ends, and she held a single sunflower in her hand. "For you," she said, offering it to Harper. Harper beamed. "I love it." Elodie stepped inside, her eyes moving to Patrick. "You clean up well." He looked her over slowly, taking in the subtle shimmer of her earrings and the way her dress fell just above her knees. "You're gonna ruin me for normal nights out." "I thought we agreed there's no such thing as normal anymore." They exchanged Harper's overnight bag with Patrick's neighbor, who waved them off with a knowing smile. Harper blew a kiss from the window as they stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, Patrick glanced sideways at Elodie. "So, where are we going?" "You'll see." They stepped out into the evening light, and his jaw tightened slightly when he caught sight of the sleek black car waiting at the curb. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said, "but tonight's not just about dinner." He slid into the car beside her, the city blurring past the windows as they drove uptown. He didn't ask questions, just held her hand, feeling the warmth of her fingers settle something restless in his chest. When the car finally stopped, Patrick blinked at the building outside. It wasn't a restaurant. It was a brownstone refurbished, clean-lined, with ivy climbing up the side and soft golden light spilling from the windows. Elodie opened her door. "Come on." He followed her up the steps, confused until she turned a key in the door and pushed it open. The front room was wide and filled with light hardwood floors, high ceilings, and an open kitchen with a long island. There were no photos on the walls yet, but the space felt lived in, warm. "You bought a house," Patrick said, stunned. "No," she said, turning to face him. "We did." He stared at her, not quite comprehending. "I found it last month, close to Harper's school, big enough for 3 bedrooms, a backyard. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure until you were sure." "Elodie, this is." "I know it's fast," she said quickly, "but everything about us has been fast and right. I don't want to keep living in separate pieces of a life. I want one life, with you, with her." He stepped closer, his voice low. "You sure about that?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He looked around the room again. "You really want to move in together?" "I want to start the rest of our lives, and I want it to be here, with pancakes and glitter crayons and you forgetting your wallet every time we go out." He laughed, almost in disbelief. "Say something," she whispered. He touched her cheek, brushing his thumb just beneath her eye. "I love you." Her breath caught. "I didn't say it before," he continued. "I should have, but I was scared, not of you, of losing you, of not being enough." "You're more than enough, Patrick." He kissed her then, deeper this time, anchored in certainty. When they pulled apart, she rested her head against his shoulder. "So," she murmured, "was that a yes?" "It's a hell yes." A week later, the brownstone was filled with cardboard boxes, Harper's toys sprawled across the living room, and the scent of cinnamon muffins wafting from the kitchen. Patrick had taken the day off from the diner to hang a bookshelf while Elodie assembled a desk for Harper's room. That night, they laid on the floor, Harper asleep upstairs, a record playing low in the background. Elodie's head rested on Patrick's chest, and his fingers traced slow circles against her back. "Do you ever feel like you're dreaming?" he asked. "Only when you're not talking." He laughed, the sound deep and full. "I used to think I knew what love looked like, but I was wrong." "What does it look like now?" He turned slightly so he could see her face. "It looks like this, messy, loud, perfect." She kissed him softly, then whispered against his lips, "Let's never stop building." They didn't. They built a life of quiet mornings, shared coffee spoons, Saturday art projects, and school recitals. They built a family that didn't care how it started, only how fiercely it was held together. They built a home where laughter echoed and every window opened to love. And in that brownstone on the corner of a tree-lined street, where pancakes were always on the menu and love was always in the air, they lived completely, joyfully, and together. Forever.